Hey, how's it going, guys? This is a video I'm making by request by one of the fellas that subscribes to my channel, and he was curious about the steps that I think you should go through to pick an airgun scope. So that's what we're about to do. In just a second, we'll kick this thing off. Okay, guys that watch my videos know this is one of my favorite scopes, but that doesn't mean it's the right scope for you. There's a lot of steps to picking out the right scope for the right gun, for the right purpose, for the right person. We're fixing to start on that. We're going to list them one at a time. The length of the scope. Now that can be a big determining factor on what will work with your gun, because if it's a very short gun, say a Beeman R7 or something like that, that's a break barrel, a scope that long's not going to work because you won't be able to open the breech. The same goes for a lot of 10-meter rifles that have the breech close to the cocking handle. A lot of those require a very short scope. So think about what's going to fit your gun, get that out of the way before you go any further. Now, if you have a compact rifle or you have a very lightweight rifle, you're obviously not going to want a 3-pound target scope sitting on top of it. So keep that in mind, because if you put a gigantic scope on a nice, small, compact rifle, it looks like an elephant riding a tricycle. It just looks screwed up, and it's not going to help you shoot any better. Springer or PCP. A scope sitting on a Springer looks a lot like this. A scope sitting on a PCP looks more like this. Now, while that may look like a gross exaggeration, it honestly is not. Springers are incredibly hard on scopes. When you hear about guys saying that they trash scopes with a Springer rifle, believe me, it happens, especially the Magnum Springers. There's a lot of vibration, a lot of violence, and it has double recoil. So there's a lot of things going on that can tear a scope up. It's like sticking a scope in a paint shaker for a while. Honestly, that's what Springers do to them. Where a scope being on top of a normal rifle is just basically taking the same impact one direction over and over, and it's built for that impact. .30mm or 1-inch. If you have a preference, make sure and factor that in when you get ready to start choosing scopes. For me, I don't have a preference. I just prefer good glass. But a lot of guys do, especially guys that are going to dial to extreme distance. The 30mm can be a big edge. On the other hand, the 1-inch can be an edge when it comes to lightweight. Where you prefer the focus to be. There's guys that like it on the front, there's guys that like it on the side, there's guys that like it take it up the rear like the SWFAs do. For me, I really don't have a preference. As long as it'll focus and give me a good sharp image and cut the parallax completely out, I'm good with it. The type of reticle. There basically are two types. There's a single point reference reticle like these, and there's the multi-point type of reticles like these. Something that's worth thinking about with the reticles. If you can afford it and it's not just stretching your budget too much, the multi-point reference reticles are really good, especially for the budget-minded scopes, because a lot of those scopes don't track or hold zero very well. And if you do get it zeroed and it's holding zero, the last thing you want to do is start cranking on knobs and taking a chance of the point of impact moving around on you. So the multi-point can be really handy. And the fact is, even with really, really fast air rifles, guys fool themselves. They still shoot like a rainbow. Those things are shooting like a crossbow or a muzzle loader. So it's not flat shooting as you think it is. If you doubt me, go out and shoot a 22-50 for a while, then you'll see what flat shooting looks like. But air guns have a real arc to them, so the extra reference points can really be handy. While we're talking about reticles, illuminated or not, there's guys that strongly prefer one or the other. It's a lot like having a swimming pool. There's people that can't stand them. There's people that won't live in a house without it. The illuminated reticle is a lot like that. The brand of scope. Now, there are certain brands that have a really good track record for performance, for good warranty work, for good customer service. To me, those brands are worth paying a little extra for, but that's not to say that there aren't other brands that have the exact same quality for the exact same price, sometimes even better. Think about this when you're hung up on a brand. There's not that many places out there that are actually making scopes, and there's a good chance a couple of the lines that you don't like and a couple of the lines that you do like came off the exact same assembly line. These scopes are built to the specs that the engineers requested and are willing to pay for in the scopes. That has a lot more to do with it than the logo that's stamped on the side of it. So if you're hell-bent on one brand, there's a couple that I think it's hard to beat. The Leupold, Bushnell, Weaver, and SWFA. I think if a man bought nothing but those 4 brands of scope the rest of their lives, regardless of their budget, I don't see a way you could go wrong. Think about the purpose of the scope. If you're going to be hunting, then there's really no reason for big exposed target turrets, and something that's really finicky, you want something a little more compact, a little lower magnification, and something that is a little handier in the woods. Now, if you're target shooting, you want the high magnification. You're not really worried about the size of the scope. Like I say, keep the purpose in mind when you're getting ready to pick out your scope. The magnification, this can be a little tricky. For me personally, I would rather have a little less magnification than the guy next to me than a little more. If you get too much magnification, you get a lot of distortion. It really cuts down on your field of view, which I freaking hate. And the quality of the image that you're looking at always goes down. So if you're trying to decide, say you have it narrowed down to a particular scope and they offer it in 3 to 9, 4 to 12, 6 to 18, 8 to 32, and you realize that you're shooting a 10 power all the time, go with the 3 to 9 if you can, or go with the 4 to 12. There's no need paying for the extra magnification because you're also going to pay for it in weight, price, and the quality of the image. If you know you're going to shoot on a lower magnification most of the time, then don't jump up to the higher magnification. You don't get anything out of it except for extra headaches. Fixed or variable. I have a whole video devoted to this. Me personally, if it's a purpose gun, I like the fixed power scopes. It's just something that I prefer. Every time I look through it, I'm getting the exact same field of view. I have a better idea of how far the animals are just through looking through the scope because I'm used to that comfortable scale in there. So that's something worth looking at. Now, if you're going to be moving it around from gun to gun and you're not quite sure, then a variable makes sense. And a variable makes sense in a lot of applications. But for me personally, I just prefer the fixed, but decide up front which one you want. The thing about the fixed powers is there's less to choose from for sure. You should also be thinking about where you're buying this scope. I would rather pay a little bit more, know it came from a reputable vendor that's going to back me up, that's going to help me if I need to send it to the factory, that's going to follow through. A lot of times the vendors will simply take the scope back and send you a brand new one, and they'll work it out with the manufacturer. That kind of shit's hard to beat, and compared to dealing with somebody on eBay that you've never heard of, online that you don't have a clue about, a lot of times dealing with a reputable vendor, even though it costs a little more up front, it'll save you a lot of headaches in the end, especially if you run into a problem. The minimum focus distance. While there's a ton of great scopes out there that have an adjustable objective or side focus, a lot of them, especially the ones built for centerfire, will only focus down to 50 yards, sometimes 100 yards. So for air guns, they're pretty much useless. For me, if it'll focus down to 25 yards, I'm good with that and I can live with that. But a lot of guys want it to go all the way down to 10 yards, especially if you shoot indoors, you live up north, or you shoot in leagues, or you shoot field target. So the focus distance is something that you're going to have to think about too. Like I say, for me personally, a scope that'll go down to 25 yards is plenty good enough. I shoot informally, so it's not that big a deal to me. But to a lot of guys, it's a huge deal. So put that right on top of your shopping list and you can go ahead and cull out a bunch of these choices. The actual cost of the scope. For most guys, this is the final, or maybe the first, determining factor in what they get. Everybody knows their budget. You know yours better than I do. I know mine. So for me personally, if I have it kind of narrowed down to 2 scopes, for example, and one's $200 and one's $300, I would rather wait a little longer and get the $300 scope than to buy the $200 scope, because if I get the $200 scope, I know me, every time I look through it and there's any problem of any kind, anytime that the scope moves or I think there's a point of impact shift, I'm going to blame the scope every single freaking time, and the whole time I'm going to be kicking my dumb ass in the ass because I didn't get what I really wanted. And that's a bullshit, screwed up ass feeling. Okay guys, there you go. I hope this helps some of you guys choose your next rifle scope and make wise choices, because Lord knows I've made a shit pot load of bad ones, and it's been an expensive lesson learning what I've learned through scopes, but I do hope that I can pass some of this on to some of you guys.